The garage door slammed shut behind her. Elaine flinched not because of the sound, but because of the man standing there, waiting with an umbrella in hand. He was tall, mid-30s maybe, his posture calm and steady. His dark skin gleamed faintly under the overhead lights, and his uniform was crisp despite the storm outside. His name tag read, Marcus B. He wasn't supposed to be there, at least not for her. Elaine Monroe was used to being driven, not escorted. She was the CEO of Monroe Tech, and CEOs didn't get wet, didn't wait, didn't flinch. But today, nothing was quite going the way it should. Marcus stepped forward, raising the black umbrella without a word, and positioned it gently over her head. "It's coming down hard," he said, voice smooth and low. "Didn't want you walking into that mess alone." Elaine glanced toward the far end of the garage where her driver was supposed to be. The car wasn't there. No text, no call, no explanation. Typical. She turned back toward the man in front of her, uncertain. "Thank you," she said curtly, more out of habit than sincerity. Marcus didn't smile, didn't nod excessively like most people who tried to get on her good side. He simply said, "Not everyone does kind things because you're the CEO. Some of us just don't like to see people sad." The comment caught her off guard. Sad? Was that how she looked? Elaine straightened her posture instinctively, as if sadness was a flaw to be corrected by better body language. "I'm not sad," she replied, her voice cool. "Just tired of incompetence." Marcus nodded, not arguing. The silence that followed wasn't awkward. It was the kind that filled space with unspoken thoughts, neither threatening nor friendly, just real. Rain hissed beyond the concrete walls of the garage, pooling in corners and dancing on the slick pavement. The storm made everything feel heavier. Elaine studied Marcus from the corner of her eye. He wasn't like the security guards she was used to. There was no stiffness, no sense of hierarchy in his demeanor. He wasn't deferential, but he wasn't insolent either. He was simply present, grounded in a way that unsettled her more than she cared to admit. "Do you always wait for executives with umbrellas?" she asked, one brow raised. "Only when they look like they've forgotten what warmth feels like," he said, with just the faintest suggestion of a smile. Her lips twitched almost a smile, but not quite. She wasn't in the business of being charmed. Her driver finally appeared, headlights slicing through the rain as the car pulled into view. The umbrella tilted slightly, Marcus adjusting to shield her until the very last moment. As she stepped into the car, she turned back. "Thank you, Marcus," she said. He nodded, this time with a spark of something genuine behind his eyes. "You're welcome, Miss Monroe. Stay dry." The car door shut with a soft thud. As they pulled out of the garage, Elaine didn't reach for her phone or glance at her planner. Instead, she looked out at the rain-blurred streets of Manhattan, and for a reason she couldn't quite name, thought about Marcus's words. Some of us just don't like to see people sad. That night, she stayed later than usual, not out of necessity but restlessness. Something about the encounter wouldn't leave her. It wasn't romantic, not in the conventional sense. It was something subtler. Respect? Curiosity? Recognition? She couldn't name it. She just knew it felt rare. The next morning, as always, she arrived at the office before everyone else. The building was still waking up, elevators humming, lights flickering to life, the distant clatter of early emails being sent. Her assistant hadn't arrived yet. The space was hers alone. On her desk, carefully placed beside her monitor, was a yellow post-it note. The handwriting was clean, unpretentious. "Lunch tomorrow, quiet diner, 114th and Lenox. No suits, just stories. No name, no title, no pressure, just a question." Elaine stared at it for a long time. She wasn't used to being asked anything that didn't have a business objective behind it. This note had no agenda. And maybe that's why it felt so intrusive. She picked it up, examined it, then walked it calmly to the trash and dropped it in. She returned to her desk, opened her laptop, and began scrolling through her morning briefings. But the words blurred. The numbers looked like noise. Her mind had already wandered back to the man, the umbrella, the warmth in the middle of a cold garage. After 15 minutes, she stood up, walked back to the trash can, reached in, retrieved the post-it. She didn't smooth it out, didn't overthink. She folded it once and placed it gently into her leather purse, slipping it between her phone and a hardcover notebook. It rested there like a secret she hadn't decided to tell herself yet. Elaine didn't plan on going. That was the first lie she told herself. The second came as she stood in front of her walk-in closet the next day, staring at a sea of charcoal blazers and navy sheath dresses. Not a single item fit the phrase, "no suits." Still, she found a cream blouse with a modest neckline, paired it with dark jeans she hadn't worn in 3 years, and wrapped a neutral-toned trench coat around herself like armor. The outfit felt foreign, like a version of her she'd discarded long ago. Yet, when she looked in the mirror, there was something almost young in the reflection. Not innocent, but less armored. The diner wasn't far, a 20-minute drive uptown. She arrived 10 minutes early, scanning the simple neon sign, Jack's Place, home of the best pie in Harlem, a humble promise. No marble floors, no glass elevators. Just the warmth of a city corner soaked in memories and cinnamon. Inside, the place smelled of coffee and butter, vinyl booths, formica tables, and a waitress with a tired smile who called her sweetheart. Elaine hated that word in boardrooms. Here, it felt disarming. She chose a booth by the window. 5 minutes passed, then 7. And just when she was about to check her phone, he walked in. Marcus. Same calm stride, same ease, as if he belonged everywhere and nowhere at once. But this time, he wasn't in uniform. He wore a deep green sweater, faded jeans, and boots that had seen more city corners than most men in her circle ever dared to tread. He smiled when he saw her, not the smile of someone impressed by what she wore or surprised she showed up. Just glad, genuinely glad. "You came," he said as he slid into the booth across from her. "You left a note," she replied, almost defensively. Could have been anyone. But it wasn't. He looked at her for a beat longer than most would dare. Not intrusive, just interested. A waitress appeared with menus, but he waved her off gently. "Coffee, please. 2 sugars. She'll have the same, unless I'm wrong." Elaine raised an eyebrow but didn't object. She didn't drink coffee with sugar, but she didn't correct him. Not yet. Silence settled again, not awkward, just unstructured. "So," she began, "what exactly is this? A conversation? An interview? A social experiment?" Marcus chuckled. "Maybe just a pause. A space where 2 people talk without resumes between them. I haven't done that in a long time. I can tell." He said it kindly, without mockery. Like he understood how loneliness could dress itself in power. The coffee arrived. She took a sip. Too sweet. She didn't hate it. Marcus leaned back. "You ever wonder why people like us never really talk to each other?" "People like us," she echoed. "You're a security guard. I'm a CEO." "Exactly," he said. "Same building, same hours. Same storm last night, but different floors, different rules. I watch the cameras. You control the cameras. I know your schedule better than your assistant does, but until yesterday, you didn't know my name." Elaine bristled. Not from insult, but truth. "That's how companies work. That's how systems work," he corrected. "But people? We're wired for something better." His words shouldn't have landed. They should have sounded naive. Instead, they rang clear like a chime in a silent hallway. She shifted. "Why now? Why that note?" He looked out the window. "Because yesterday, you looked like someone who forgot what being seen feels like. And I've been that person before, invisible, even while standing in plain sight." Elaine said nothing. Her hand cradled the mug, fingers wrapped in warmth she didn't realize she'd been missing. "You think you know what people like me need?" she asked quietly. "I don't pretend to," he replied. "But I know what people like you are often denied. Trust, patience, a chance to be more than a position." She blinked slowly, not from fatigue, but from the slow unfurling of something she didn't want to name. "Vulnerability, interest, safety," he continued. "You see, people don't look at me and expect stories. They expect orders, or silence, or, at best, thankless service." His tone stayed level, but underneath it was history. Pain, dignity. "I've seen executives who wouldn't ride the same elevator as me. Seen guests mistake me for a delivery guy. And I've watched people pretend not to hear when I say good morning." She finally looked him in the eye. "You're saying I'm one of those people?" "I'm saying," he answered, "you weren't, not yesterday. And maybe, for once, I wanted to see if that meant something." Elaine leaned back, exhaling a breath she didn't realize she'd held. The pie came. Apple. Still warm. She didn't order it, but he cut a piece and pushed the plate toward her. Jack makes it fresh at 6. Miss that, you miss the point of the place. She tasted it. Cinnamon, butter, and sugar. Simple. Real. It's good, she admitted. Told you. Their conversation drifted. Past titles. Past job descriptions. She told him about her mother's diner back in Ohio, how she hated the smell of grease in her hair, but missed the way regulars treated her like a person, not a symbol. He told her about growing up in Queens, watching his father get passed over for promotions by men half as competent, but twice as white. He didn't say it with bitterness, just truth. Elaine listened, not with polite nods, but with genuine focus. By the time she glanced at her watch, an hour had passed, maybe more. She reached for her purse, unsure what the next move was. Marcus stopped her. No bill here. Jack doesn't charge friends. We're friends now? She asked, half teasing. Maybe. Or maybe we're just two people who remember what eye contact feels like. She stood. So did he. Outside, the sky had cleared. The streets shimmered with leftover rain. As they stepped onto the sidewalk, he handed her a folded napkin. Inside, in the same careful handwriting, "Next time, no coffee, just questions." She didn't say yes, but she didn't throw it away either. And when she walked toward her car, her footsteps were slower than usual. Like maybe, just maybe, she wasn't in a hurry to be the CEO again. Elaine sat alone in her office that evening, the city glowing beneath her like a sea of fireflies. She should have been reviewing investor reports, prepping for the board presentation, replying to her COO's 6th email about cutting costs in the R&D division, but her cursor blinked on a blank screen, untouched for nearly an hour. Her mind was still at Jack's place, still hearing Marcus's voice say, "Next time, no coffee, just questions." That napkin was tucked into her desk drawer now, hidden under a file she had no intention of reading tonight. There was a strange warmth in her chest, an echo of something she hadn't allowed herself to feel in years. Connection without transaction. A gentle knock interrupted her thoughts. Sandra, her assistant, poked her head in. "Sorry to bother, Miss Monroe, but there's someone at the lobby asking to see you. He said you know him. Marcus?" Elaine stood, heart ticking faster. "Send him up." When he arrived, the contrast was jarring. In a tower of brushed steel and glass, where everyone wore tailored ambition, Marcus stood grounded, dark denim jacket, calloused hands, calm eyes. He held a brown paper bag. "Didn't want you missing dinner. Figured spreadsheets don't feed the soul." Elaine let out a breath that could have been a laugh. "You brought me food?" "Fried catfish and cornbread. Jack said if you don't eat it hot, he'll revoke my good taste credentials." She gestured to the small meeting table by the window. "Sit, but this doesn't make us co-workers." "Didn't think it did," he replied, setting the bag down and unwrapping the containers like it was the most natural thing in the world. She watched him, amused despite herself. He moved with ease, not in a rush, not performing, just present. They ate quietly at first. The food was good, comforting, unapologetically greasy, full of stories and Sundays. "Why are you really here, Marcus?" she asked, wiping her hands. He looked at her. Not the kind of look that demanded attention, but the kind that offered it. "Because I wanted to ask you a question, the kind that doesn't fit into a post-it. Try me." He leaned forward slightly. "What did it cost you to become her?" Elaine froze. The question landed like a stone dropped in still water. Become who? The woman who runs this empire. The one whose name is printed on parking spots and whispered in elevators. The one who doesn't flinch when someone tells her she's too much. She stared at him, unsure whether to deflect or dissolve. But something in his tone, soft but rooted, kept her still. "It cost me softness," she finally said. "It cost me Sundays, and trust, and birthdays I pretended didn't matter." Marcus nodded slowly. "That's a high price. And worth it," she added almost defensively. "Most days. And the other days?" She didn't answer. Instead, she stood and walked to the floor, to ceiling window, arms folded. The city pulsed below. "You know, when I got this office," she said, "my father told me it would mean nothing unless I filled it with something that couldn't be taken away." "Did you?" She turned. "I don't know yet." Marcus didn't push further. He packed up the empty containers, moving with a quiet that matched the room. Before leaving, he paused by the door. "You don't have to be softer for me, Elaine, but you also don't have to be harder than you are. You're allowed to be seen." She didn't respond, not out loud, but she didn't look away either. The next day, whispers spread across the building. Not rumors, just the kind of quiet speculation that surfaces when the impossible brushes against the ordinary. Security cameras had caught a brief moment, the CEO walking Marcus to the elevator, smiling, saying something that made him laugh. It was the first time anyone had seen her smile like that in years. Her assistant said nothing but raised an eyebrow. Her COO mentioned it in jest. Elaine let it pass. She'd learned long ago that the more you explain yourself, the less they believe you. But late that night, she found herself walking back to the lobby, heels echoing in the empty halls. Marcus was finishing his shift, clipboard in hand. "I thought you'd be gone hours ago," he said. "I was." She hesitated. "I came back." He waited. She continued. "I found an old photo, me and my mom at her diner. We're both in aprons, flour on our faces. I used to stand on milk crates to reach the counter. Sounds like the beginning of a good story." It was. Then life happened. College, degrees, mergers. I told myself I'd come back to it when I had time. I never did. Marcus looked at her with something close to reverence, not for her title, but for the crack in her voice when she said never. He didn't touch her, didn't move closer, but the air between them grew smaller. "You can still write the rest of that story," he said. "Maybe," she replied. "Maybe with the right co-author." They both smiled. Not a romantic promise, not yet, but the start of something not dictated by hierarchy or structure. Just two people, willing to meet at the edge of their own walls. She glanced at the time. "You hungry?" "Always. Let's go find a place with pie. No resumes allowed." He chuckled. "No suits either?" "Not tonight." And with that, they stepped out into the city, two silhouettes against a skyline, too bright to ignore, too honest to lie beneath. If you felt seen in Marcus's quiet strength or Elaine's quiet courage, don't just leave. Hit the like button and subscribe so you won't miss the next part of their journey. And if something in their story spoke to your own experience, we'd love to hear it. Leave a comment below. Your voice matters here. The elevator stalled between the 21st and 22nd floors. Just a short tremor at first, then a quiet jolt. The lights flickered but held. Elaine instinctively reached for the emergency button, but Marcus had already pressed it, calm and methodical. "It's okay," he said, looking over at her. "Happens maybe once a year. Maintenance knows." She exhaled, steadying herself. "Funny how I control the entire top floor, and yet here I am stuck between levels. There's a metaphor in there somewhere," he said, half smiling. The elevator didn't budge. The soft buzz of fluorescent light hummed around them. Elaine stared at the brushed metal doors, then glanced sideways. Marcus leaned casually against the panel, arms crossed, as if he were more at home in the pause than the motion. "You're too calm," she said. "You've been through worse than a stuck elevator? Try growing up in a 6th-floor walk-up where the landlord forgot the building even had tenants," he replied. "You learn patience when the heat cuts out in January and the elevator hasn't worked since Reagan was president." She didn't laugh, but her lips twitched. "You always this composed?" "No," he said honestly, "but I've learned to save my panic for when it matters." Elaine nodded slowly. "I don't remember the last time I sat still this long during daylight hours." "Good. Then maybe the universe knew what it was doing." She turned to him fully. "Tell me something no one at Monroe Tech knows about you." Marcus tilted his head. "You mean besides the fact that I'm a terrible dancer?" "That's obvious," she deadpanned. "I mean something real." He thought for a moment, then said, "I used to want to be a history teacher. Thought I'd teach at a public high school in Brooklyn, maybe coach basketball on the side. But then life got complicated." "What happened?" she asked, softer now. "My mom got sick, bills piled up, teaching didn't pay enough. So I took whatever work I could get, security paid. Kept a roof over her head. Dignity costs more than dreams sometimes." Elaine looked away. The silence returned, heavier this time. She didn't speak out of pity, she respected it. The quiet resilience, the unspoken sacrifices. After a beat, she said, "My father didn't want me to take over Monroe Tech. He thought I was too soft." Marcus raised an eyebrow. "You? Soft?" "At 17, I cried during a merger meeting when 36 factory workers lost their jobs. He said I'd never make it in the industry if I let empathy cloud my judgment. So you built a fortress, brick by brick, voice lowered, words sharpened, smiles rationed. And I got the job, but I don't know if I ever got myself back. Marcus didn't rush to respond. Maybe you didn't lose yourself. Maybe you just buried the part that hurt too much to carry. They locked eyes. There was no romance in that moment, no swelling music. Just a man and a woman trapped between floors, discovering pieces of each other the world never asked for. Then the elevator groaned, shuddered, and began to move again. The moment broke. Elaine straightened, smoothing her blouse, reclaiming the mask. The doors opened to the 22nd floor. "Duty calls," she said briskly, stepping out. Marcus didn't follow. "I'll catch the next ride," he said. She paused, turned back. "Thank you for not filling the silence with noise. You're welcome, and next time I'll bring a radio." Her laugh was real this time, low, surprised, unguarded. Later that week, Monroe Tech hosted its annual charity gala. Black tie, exclusive, the kind of event where power disguised itself in champagne flutes and philanthropic speeches. Elaine moved through the crowd with practiced elegance, her gown a perfect shade of winter blue, her expression serene. But her eyes kept scanning the edges. Near the perimeter, in a black suit borrowed from a cousin, stood Marcus. Not a guest, not a guard, somewhere in between. Elaine found him during the dessert course. "Didn't expect you here," she said. "Neither did the maître d'," he replied. "But I told him I was your +1. He said I wasn't on the list. I said, I'm on her radar. That's better than a list." She smiled. "You're not wrong." They drifted toward the balcony, the noise of the room fading behind them. The city sparkled below like it had something to prove. "You clean up well," she said. "So do you," he replied. "But you wore that same look yesterday in the elevator, the one that says you're still searching for your own story." She didn't argue, didn't pretend. "Sometimes I wonder if the story I wrote for myself was ever mine to begin with." "Then rewrite it," he said simply. "You're the one holding the pen." Inside, someone called her name. She glanced back. Obligations waited, applause, speeches, appearances. She looked at Marcus again. "You're not like anyone I've met." "That's because no one's ever looked at me this long." A beat. Then she said, "Meet me tomorrow, same diner, no suits, just truth. I'll bring the pie. I'll bring the questions." And with that, she turned, heels clicking back into the crowd. But something had shifted. She no longer moved like a woman trapped in power. She moved like someone who had just remembered the way out. The morning air over Harlem carried a hint of spring, though winter hadn't fully let go. Elaine stepped out of the black SUV wearing jeans, real jeans, and a navy peacoat she hadn't worn in years. No assistant trailed behind her. No calendar alerts buzzed in her ear. For once, time was hers. Jack's place stood as it always had, brick chipped from decades of weather, a tin sign that squeaked when the wind pushed too hard, and windows steamed from the kitchen warmth inside. It was ordinary. It was perfect. Marcus was already seated by the window, a booth near the back. His jacket hung on the coat rack beside him, and a paperback novel sat beside his coffee. He looked up and smiled, not with surprise, not with expectation, just a quiet welcome that made her heart beat slow. Elaine slid into the seat across from him. "You're early," she said. "You're right on time," he replied. "That's the difference between people who live by alarms and people who live by sunrises." She smirked. "You read fortune cookies on your break?" "Only the good ones." They ordered without glancing at menus. He asked for the usual. She asked for something warm and sweet, something her younger self might have chosen before calories and reputation became enemies. The waitress, a woman in her 60s with a name tag that read Rita, beamed at them. "First date?" she asked, teasing but kind. Elaine opened her mouth to correct her, then paused. "Let's call it the first truth," she said. Over pancakes and black coffee, they talked not about quarterly earnings or background checks, or who knew who in the boardroom. They talked about music, about the smell of old books, about the pain of losing people slowly, before they even die. Marcus told her about his mother, how dementia had stolen her piece by piece, and how he'd cared for her through her forgetting. Elaine listened not as a CEO, but as a daughter who had watched her own father slip into silence after a stroke, the man who once commanded boardrooms reduced to blinking at the television, unmoved by the news ticker he used to obsess over. I used to think power meant immunity, she said. Turns out, it just means you suffer in better clothes. Marcus didn't laugh. He reached across the table, just enough for his fingers to brush hers, not a claim, not a move, just a moment of grounding. You suffer, he said, but you don't have to suffer alone. Elaine looked down, her hand unmoving beneath his. You know, I spent years convincing myself that I didn't need anyone. That intimacy was a liability, that love had to wait until everything else was done. And when is everything else ever done? He asked gently. Exactly, she whispered. The bell above the door rang as new customers entered, shifting the energy, but their booth remained a still point in the gentle chaos. Just as they stood to leave, Rita handed them a receipt folded around a note. You two remind me of me and my husband when we first started out, she said. He was a mechanic, I was a secretary. No one thought we made sense, but here we are 42 years later. Don't wait until the world agrees. It never will. Elaine smiled, slipping the note into her coat pocket without unfolding it. Outside, the streets were busier now. The city was waking up, impatient and relentless. As they reached her car, Marcus turned to her. Let me walk today, he said. I'll see you tonight. She hesitated. At work? Wherever you'll let me. She nodded once, then got in and closed the door. Back at Monroe Tech, the day unfurled like most others' calls, meetings, decisions. But something had shifted. Her tone was warmer, her silences more thoughtful. During the executive strategy meeting, she pushed back on a proposal to automate more positions, citing community impact over cost savings. The room blinked. She didn't explain herself, didn't need to. That night, she walked into the security office unannounced. Marcus was reading again, feet up on an unused desk. Trouble sleeping? He asked without looking up. Number trouble pretending, she said. He looked at her then. Tired of the mask? Number just tired of forgetting who I am beneath it. M. She sat beside him, uninvited but welcome. They didn't talk for several minutes, just existed, shared space, breathed the same quiet. Then she said, You know the worst part about climbing the ladder? You spend so long focused on the next rung, you forget what the sky looks like. Marcus smiled faintly. And maybe, he said, you were never meant to climb alone. She looked at him then, really looked. Past the uniform, past the titles they didn't share. There was something in his gaze that didn't flinch, not at her status, not at her silence, not at her scars. She rested her head on his shoulder, just for a second. Don't get used to this, she murmured. Wouldn't dream of it, he replied. But in that moment, they both knew something unspoken had shifted forever. That night, Elaine dreamt of simpler things, not mergers or numbers, but the sound of frying eggs, the creak of an old diner booth, the warmth of cornbread in her hands. And when she woke, she didn't reach for her phone. She reached for the memory of his hand brushing hers, and for the first time in years, it was enough to make her smile before dawn. Elaine stepped out of the boardroom, her heels clicking sharply against the polished marble as murmurs trailed behind her. The quarterly meeting had just ended, and while most executives congratulated themselves on projections and investor confidence, Elaine had done something unusual. She had challenged the narrative. Instead of approving the proposed acquisition of a smaller firm known for ruthless downsizing, she called for a delay. She'd cited ethical review and community impact, terms not often heard in those walls. The room had fallen still for a moment, then it cracked with polite, confused applause. Behind the masks of professionalism, whispers were beginning to circulate. As she walked toward her office, Sandra, her assistant, intercepted her. There's a memo being circulated anonymously, she said under her breath. It implies favoritism, that you've been seen meeting with a staff-level employee outside of work. Elaine stopped mid-step. Who sent it? No name, but it's spreading. Let it spread, Elaine said calmly, but her jaw tightened. Truth doesn't need permission. Back in her office, she stood by the window, watching the city glisten beneath a soft drizzle. Her reflection stared back at her, calm, polished, composed, but something simmered beneath. It wasn't shame, it wasn't fear, it was something deeper, a sense of battle lines being drawn. Downstairs, Marcus adjusted the security monitors, unaware of the storm forming above him. He was used to people watching him too closely, too skeptically. Ever since his first shift in a corporate building, He'd felt the weight of eyes that saw his skin before they saw his name. But this was different. People were talking, and not just in passing. There were pauses in conversation when he entered rooms. Jokes that curdled into tension. He walked past two junior analysts in the lobby. One of them nudged the other and said, "Guess anyone can climb the ladder these days." Marcus didn't flinch. He'd grown up in rooms where his presence had to be earned twice, sometimes 3 times, before it was acknowledged. He knew what they were saying. He also knew it didn't matter not if Elaine stood where he thought she did. That evening, she came to the basement floor herself. No entourage, no announcement. Just a woman in a gray trench coat with a question in her eyes. "Can we talk?" she asked. Marcus nodded, gesturing toward the quiet break room. It was lit by one humming light and smelled faintly of coffee and old vinyl chairs. She sat, unfastening her coat. "There's a narrative building," she began. "People are talking. About you, about me, about what this is." Marcus leaned back. "And what is it, Elaine?" She looked at him for a long moment. "It's honest, and that seems to scare people more than lies ever did." He nodded, slow and measured. "You know they won't stop with gossip. It's not just talk. This is corporate America. They weaponize whispers. Then let them. I'm not hiding in boardrooms anymore. But I'm not you. I don't have the same armor." His voice was quiet, not bitter, but real. "They won't just try to undermine you, Elaine. They'll erase me. Or worse, they'll paint me as a charity case you entertained to prove a point." Her throat tightened. "You're not a point. You're the first real thing I've chosen in years." Silence held for a beat. "Then fight with me," she said. "Not for press, not for image, for truth. For something better than what this place pretends to be." That night, Elaine made a choice that broke every unspoken rule in her world. She walked into the weekly executive cocktail hour, not in her usual navy suit, but in a soft burgundy dress that made no apologies. And she brought Marcus with her. The room froze as they entered. Crystal glasses paused midair. One executive whispered audibly, "This is bold." Elaine heard it. She didn't care. She led Marcus through the room as if she had always meant to. Introduced him not as head of security, but as someone whose insight she valued. "This is Marcus. He's helped me rethink the way we define loyalty in this company," she said to a stunned VP. "He also makes better observations than half our consultants." The room tried to recover. A few offered polite smiles. Others turned away, clinging to their disbelief. Elaine didn't flinch. She knew what she was doing. She wasn't making a statement. She was making a stand. Afterward, on the ride back to her place, she sat beside Marcus in the town car, legs crossed, hands still. "They'll come after me," she said quietly. "They'll say I've lost objectivity, that I've blurred lines." Marcus looked at her. "Have you?" "No," she said. "I've only started seeing them for what they are, walls meant to keep power in the same hands, and I'm done pretending those walls serve us." He reached for her hand and she let him. "You're not just brave," he said. "You're tired of being afraid." She smiled faintly. "Maybe I am, but I'm not tired of us." And in the quiet of the car, rolling past blinking streetlights and late-night diners, two people sat closer than the world allowed, daring to imagine a future where their story didn't need to be hidden. The next morning, someone from PR requested a meeting. HR flagged a concern. Legal suggested a statement. Elaine met them all with the same answer. "We are a company of innovation. It's time we innovated who we listened to." By week's end, Marcus found a note in his locker. No name, just a typed sentence. "Stay in your lane." He crumpled it without reading it twice. That same day, he found another note, this one from Elaine, tucked inside his pocket when he wasn't looking. It simply read, "Lanes were made for people afraid of flying." And for the first time in a long time, he laughed, not to defend himself, not to disarm others, just because hope, when shared, is louder than fear. The Monday after the cocktail hour was quieter than usual at Monroe Tech. The usual buzz of the lobby was subdued, as though everyone was waiting for something to break. Elaine walked through the front doors, not as an untouchable CEO, but as a woman whose choices had dared to bend the invisible code of corporate conduct. Her presence was met with nods that felt more rehearsed than genuine, greetings that lingered too long or not at all. The silence behind her heels wasn't absence of sound, it was the presence of judgment. But she had walked through worse. In her office, the air felt colder than usual, sterile even. A fresh manila folder sat on her desk. No note, just a tab labeled, Code of Conduct Violation, Review. She flipped it open. Anonymous submissions, veiled accusations, observations about inappropriate fraternization, and potential breach of leadership boundaries. No names, no signatures, just shadows trying to push her into a corner. She didn't flinch. Instead, she picked up her phone. "Marcus, can you come upstairs?" Her voice was steady, but her stomach clenched. Minutes later, he stepped into her office, his expression calm but unreadable. "You heard?" she asked. "Enough. They've started the process. It's unofficial but coordinated." Of course they did. A black man doesn't sit beside a white CEO in a silk dress without someone panicking, he said, a bitter note under the calm. She closed the file and looked up at him. "I brought you into that room because you deserve to be seen. I won't apologize for that." "You shouldn't, but I need you to know something," he said, stepping closer. "They're going to try to use me to hurt you, and I can take it, but I won't let you be collateral for a war you didn't ask for." "Marcus," she started, but he held up a hand. "Number, I've seen this play before. They'll paint me as the one who seduced you, compromised you, dragged you into scandal. It won't be true, but it'll be loud." Elaine rose from her seat. "Then we'll be louder." That afternoon, she held a closed-door meeting with the executive committee. No press, no minutes, just presence. She laid it all on the table. "There are rumors circulating, and I'm not going to dignify them with defense. I will say this. No one here has ever questioned the mentorship of a male CEO dining with a female intern. No one blinked when promotions came with golf trips and private jets. But the moment a woman in power forms a connection with someone outside your pedigree, suddenly it's ethics, suddenly it's compromise. You don't want a code of conduct, you want a leash." There was a stunned pause. Then one voice, Roger from finance, cleared his throat. "Elaine, it's not personal, it's about optics. Everything's personal when the optics only point at people who don't fit your mold," she snapped. "Marcus does his job better than half the people upstairs. He's earned more than your tolerance. He's earned my trust. And if you can't see that, maybe it's not him who doesn't belong here." The room sat frozen. No one moved. No one challenged her. They didn't agree, but they didn't push back either. That kind of silence was its own kind of victory. Later that evening, as Marcus patrolled the garage, his earpiece crackled with static and then a voice low, familiar. "They won't say it to your face, but they're counting the days. HR's building a paper trail." It was Daniel, another security guard, older, jaded, the kind who'd long given up fighting the current. "Appreciate the heads up," Marcus replied. "You need to be careful. They can't touch her without touching you, and they'll gladly throw you under if it saves their golden girl." Marcus smiled thinly. "Let them try." That night, Elaine sat in her apartment alone, staring at the city below. The lights no longer comforted her, they pulsed like warning signals. She sipped tea that had long gone cold and reread a message from an old mentor. "Play the game, Elaine. Win it before you try to change the rules." She closed the message. Number, that version of her had expired. Instead, she drafted a company-wide email titled, "On Integrity and Humanity." In it, she wrote not about Marcus, not directly. She wrote about leadership, about the courage to connect across boundaries, about how true innovation only happens when voices at every level are heard, not just tolerated. She ended with a quote from Maya Angelou. "I've learned that people will forget what you said. People will forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel." The next morning, the email had gone viral internally first, then externally when a staffer leaked it. Blogs picked it up, LinkedIn shared it. Some praised her courage, others called it reckless. But everyone was watching now. At lunch, Marcus entered the cafeteria normally, a place he avoided. Today, he walked straight through the main floor. Some eyes followed, some turned away. Then a young Latina intern stood up and offered him a seat at her table. A beat later, a logistics analyst joined. And then another, small, silent acts, but they carried weight. Upstairs, Elaine watched from her office window. Not the moment itself, but what it represented. Resistance, reclamation, one seat at a time. That evening, Marcus found another note in his locker. This one handwritten, just 2 words, "We see you." No signature, no threats, just acknowledgement. And somehow, that meant more than applause. Elaine met him at the exit door at 6:02 p.m. "Walk with me?" she asked. He nodded. They strolled past the edge of the river, the sky bruised with early twilight. "I keep thinking about something you said," she murmured. "That they'd weaponize whispers. I thought I was ready, but the noise is louder than I expected." Marcus looked out across the water. "It's not about being ready. It's about deciding you're not going to let fear set your limits." She slipped her hand into his. "Then let's raise our voices, together." They didn't kiss. Not then. That would come later. This moment was about solidarity, about choosing to be unashamed, about building something that could outlast the storm. Even if it started with just two hands, held tightly, walking forward. 2 days after the internal memo went viral, Elaine sat across from a man she hadn't seen in nearly a decade, Harold Dean, the company's founding chairman, emeritus. He was older now, his frame slightly hunched, but his presence hadn't dimmed. They met in a quiet corner of a private club in Midtown, where rich mahogany walls smelled faintly of cigar smoke and nostalgia. "You've caused quite a stir," he said as the waiter poured their coffee. Elaine didn't smile. "Stirs are sometimes necessary to see what's settled too long at the bottom." He gave a slow, deliberate nod. "The board's nervous. You've always been ambitious, but this," he gestured vaguely, "this feels personal." "Because it is," she replied calmly. "They're trying to paint human connection as a liability. That's not leadership. That's cowardice." Harold leaned in slightly. "You want to change this place. You need to understand it first. There's more to this storm than policy." Elaine met his gaze. "You mean there's rot you helped bury and now you want me to ignore it?" "No," he said softly. "I want you to survive it." Meanwhile, Marcus had begun to notice patterns. Cameras being slightly repositioned without authorization. Logs showing access at odd hours to restricted floors. He didn't want to believe it, but the signs were there. Someone inside security was either sloppy or complicit. He began running quiet checks, reviewing badge data, security sweeps, time logs, details most ignored but which he'd built his discipline on. One name kept popping up in places that didn't make sense. Wesley Kroll, a junior IT staffer with no clearance to floors he was accessing. Marcus watched him one night on a monitor, lingering outside the HR director's office. He wasn't stealing, he was photographing files. That same evening, Marcus caught Wesley in the elevator. "Late night?" he asked. Wesley fumbled, clutching his backpack. "Just catching up on network maintenance." "On a floor you're not assigned to?" Marcus asked, voice level. "Policy changed?" Wesley shrugged, nervous. "Maybe. I'll check again." "Do that," Marcus said, stepping out and watching the doors close. He didn't say more, not yet, but the knot in his chest tightened. Back in her apartment that night, Elaine paced. She hadn't slept properly in days. Every news mention, every message from legal, every stare in the elevator reminded her how thin the ice was getting. And yet, in the quiet of her space, with a jazz record humming low and the hum of the city beyond her windows, she allowed herself to feel something she'd repressed for years. Fear not of failure, but of injustice winning. She called Marcus. "I need you to come over." He arrived 30 minutes later, slightly damp from rain, jacket clinging to his shoulders. She opened the door and simply said, "I'm tired of standing still. We need to get ahead of this." He stepped in. "What do you have in mind?" "An internal audit. My authority gives me that right. But we won't use their team. We build our own. Quietly. We trace where this slander started, and we expose it before they can spin it as scandal." Marcus crossed his arms. "That's war." "No," she said. "It's self-defense. But we do it right. Clean. Documented. And when we're ready, we lay it bare." The next few days became a maze of silent coordination. Elaine reached out to Tasha Lynn, a compliance officer she trusted from a previous role, quiet, precise, unflinching. Marcus looped in Daniel, the veteran guard who'd warned him. Reluctant at first, Daniel agreed after seeing some of the doctored footage Marcus uncovered footage, showing Marcus entering restricted floors he hadn't actually accessed. "They're setting you up," Daniel muttered. "And they're not even being subtle about it." Elaine brought Tasha up to speed. "I want to know who's behind the altered footage, who signed off on the access logs, and who benefits most if I'm removed quietly." Tasha didn't blink. "Give me 3 days." On the second night, while reviewing archived access logs, Tasha uncovered a connection that startled even her. One of the encrypted files, tied to the internal accusation memo, had metadata linking it to an external device previously assigned to the former VP of operations. That VP? Transferred out 6 months ago. Suspiciously quiet exit. But here's the twist. Wesley Kroll was his nephew. And the connection didn't stop there. The HR director's assistant who processed most of the internal complaints was linked via personal email to the same address that posted the anonymous tip. It wasn't random. It was a campaign. The more they uncovered, the clearer it became. Marcus was the pawn. Elaine was the queen they wanted off the board. By the end of day 3, they had enough to move. Tasha compiled the findings into a formal report, sealed with timestamps, witness logs, and digital trails. Elaine read through it with a cold, focused rage. "We take this to the full board," she said. "No PR, no damage control, just truth." Marcus put a hand on her shoulder. "They'll try to discredit the entire report." "Let them try," she said. "But if I go down, they go with me. And this time, I'm not going quietly." N. The night before the presentation, Marcus and Elaine sat together on her balcony, the city lights stretching far and quiet. "I used to think justice was about loud declarations," she said. "But I've learned it's about persistence, quiet choices, choosing not to let rot stay hidden just because it's comfortable." Marcus looked at her, his voice soft. "You didn't just choose me, Elaine. You chose a fight most people walk away from. That matters." She smiled, tired but resolute. "Then let's finish what we started." The next morning, the board gathered in the top-floor conference room. Glass walls, polished stone, a view that reminded everyone of how high the stakes were. Elaine entered not with an entourage but with a file. She didn't raise her voice. She simply presented, laid the report on the table, showed the connections, played the footage, let the evidence speak. And when she finished, she said only this: "You wanted to know what I stand for. Now you do." Silence fell. Then one board member, older, leaned forward. "This changes everything." Elaine met his gaze. "Number, it reveals everything. Change is up to you." Outside, Marcus waited. Not because he was afraid to be in the room, but because sometimes the loudest support is presence, not pressure. When Elaine walked out, he stood. "How did it go?" She looked at him and smiled. Truth landed like thunder, and for once, the storm belonged to them. The boardroom fallout was not immediate, but it was undeniable. Within 48 hours of Elaine's revelation, 3 resignations were submitted, 2 from the Compliance Committee, 1 from the HR department. None came with explanation, but the timing spoke volumes. The atmosphere at Monroe Tech shifted like a pressure system before a storm, tense, anticipatory, fragile. Some employees whispered cautiously about Elaine's courage, others clung tightly to silence, fearing retribution. But the truth, once spoken, refused to shrink back. Elaine returned to her office to find her assistant visibly shaken. "Ma'am," she said, holding out a printout, "you may want to see this." It was an anonymous post on a professional forum, a detailed, damning accusation claiming Elaine had manipulated evidence, used her position to cover up misconduct, and threatened internal staff to comply. No proof, no signature, just poison dressed as concern. Elaine placed the paper down slowly. "They're playing their final card," she murmured. Meanwhile, Marcus was deep into another discovery. With Daniel's help, he traced a pattern of server log tampering that predated Wesley's involvement. It stretched back almost a year, and the source? A hidden subnet buried in the building's internal systems, accessible only through a legacy admin profile, no longer listed in current registries. Someone had kept access after being let go. That someone, Tasha confirmed, was Dorian Finch, the quietly dismissed VP of Operations whose departure was smoothed over with a golden parachute and a non-disclosure clause. And he hadn't been working alone. Elaine called an emergency meeting that night with Marcus, Tasha, Daniel, and a trusted legal counsel named Naomi Bishop, a black woman in her 60s known for dissecting corporate corruption like a surgeon. Naomi reviewed the files in silence for 30 minutes, then looked up with fire in her eyes. "This isn't just internal sabotage, this is a layered dismantling. They didn't just want you gone, Elaine. They wanted to burn the memory of what you stood for." Elaine exhaled. "So how do we stop it?" Naomi leaned forward. "You don't. You expose it, all of it, on record, on your terms." The following day, Elaine scheduled a town hall meeting mandatory, live-streamed, and recorded. Employees shuffled into the atrium with wary eyes, some expecting spin, others scandal. Instead, Elaine walked to the podium alone, no teleprompter, no legal buffer. "I've been accused of many things in the past few weeks," she began, voice steady, clear. "But the loudest accusation has nothing to do with policy. It's about who I chose to respect, who I chose to stand beside." She paused, letting the silence stretch. "I didn't just trust Marcus because he earned it. I trusted him because I saw integrity where others only saw job titles. And because I knew deeply that leadership without humanity is just tyranny dressed in tailored suits." Murmurs rippled. She continued, "There's a sickness in our walls, one that hides behind procedure and precedent. But no more." Elaine then introduced Naomi, who laid out the evidence clearly, methodically, like a prosecutor in open court. She named the bad actors, displayed the timelines, revealed the falsified records. And when she finished, she said, "Silence protects power, but today, truth protects the people." After the town hall, everything moved fast. The press picked up the stream within hours. Hashtags surged. Elaine's name became a trending topic, flanked by both praise and vitriol. The board called an emergency closed session. For the first time in her career, Elaine did not attend. Instead, she sat with Marcus on the rooftop overlooking the skyline. "Do you regret it?" he asked quietly. She shook her head. "I regret staying silent for so long. I regret thinking I could win their game by their rules." "You changed the rules," he said. "You changed the story." "Not alone," she replied, then added, "They'll still come after us." "Let them," Marcus said. "We're not who we were at the start of this." That evening, a courier arrived at Elaine's door with an envelope bearing the company seal. Inside was a vote summary from the board session. 7-inch favor, 2 opposed, 1 abstained. The verdict: she would remain as CEO. But the footnote told the real story. An internal oversight committee would be formed to review all policies concerning personnel ethics, racial equity, and executive conduct. Marcus read it twice. "They didn't just keep you, they gave you the power to change the foundation." Elaine's eyes didn't leave the page. "Then we rebuild, but carefully. They're still watching, and not everyone's changed their stripes." End 1. As a symbolic first step, Elaine promoted Tasha Lynn to Senior Compliance Director and publicly recognized Daniel's contribution to the investigation. But it was Marcus's next move that surprised her. He requested a formal lateral transfer out of security into employee engagement. "You sure?" Elaine asked. "That's not a quiet job." "Exactly," Marcus said. "I'm done being a ghost. I want to be where the stories start, not just where they end." That Friday, Marcus stood at the front of a newly formed roundtable, a weekly forum for lower-tier employees to voice concerns directly to executive leadership. Elaine sat in the back. She didn't speak. She listened. And when a young black intern stood up, nervous and unsure, and shared how she often hid her braids for fear of being seen as unprofessional, Marcus leaned forward and said gently, "Don't ever shrink yourself for people too small to see your full self." The room was silent. Then slowly, it erupted into applause. Not loud, not performative, but honest. That night, Elaine wrote in her personal journal a habit she'd abandoned years ago. Her entry was short. Today, justice didn't arrive with trumpets. It arrived with tired eyes, open hearts, and hands reaching across the line. It's not over, but it's begun. She closed the book. The world outside was still flawed, still harsh. But in that sliver of space carved between truth and courage, something had taken root, and this time it would grow. The dust had barely settled when the second wave arrived. Though Elaine had weathered the internal storm and kept her position, outside forces had begun circling like wolves, scenting opportunity. An op-ed appeared in the Wall Street Tribune, questioning whether Monroe Tech's new direction, led by a CEO with personal entanglements and radical restructuring plans, was a threat to shareholder value. It was carefully worded, polished in tone, but the message was clear. Powerful people were uncomfortable with change. Elaine read the piece on a cold Sunday morning with coffee in hand, then folded the paper and dropped it in the recycling bin without a word. But Marcus could tell it stung. "They think truth is bad for business," he said. Elaine replied. "Number, they think justice is unpredictable, and they're terrified of what it might demand next." Oh, at the same time, whispers of Marcus's promotion were drawing attention. Some praised it as progress, a sign of real equity. Others, less generous, called it tokenism, saying he had been elevated not because of merit, but because he was useful for Elaine's optics. He overheard two executives murmuring outside the elevator, unaware the door had not yet closed. Used to be, you had to know someone or build a legacy. Now, just speak the right buzzwords and make friends with the CEO. Marcus didn't confront them. He simply stepped out, met their eyes and said, "Legacy is built by actions, not by entitlement." Their silence was louder than any apology. Inside the company, changes Elaine had initiated began rolling out. Hiring panels were diversified. Anonymous complaint systems were overhauled with independent reviewers. Cultural sensitivity training, once a checkbox exercise, was replaced by sessions led by former employees who had experienced workplace bias firsthand. Marcus sat in on every single one. He wasn't required to, but he knew the power of being seen, of bearing witness. He became, slowly but surely, more than a symbol. He became a mirror for the company to reflect its discomfort and, in time, its growth. One afternoon, a letter arrived at Elaine's desk, handwritten, no return address. It read, "You may think you've won, but people like you never keep the throne. Sooner or later, we find a way to remind you where you belong." There was no name, no fingerprints, just venom. Elaine didn't flinch. She handed the letter to Naomi Bishop, who was now officially acting as Monroe Tech's ethics advisor. Naomi scanned it and sighed. "This isn't a threat. It's fear dressed as arrogance. They see you rebuilding the walls with different hands, and they don't know how to stop it." Despite the noise, progress took root. One of Marcus's initiatives, a mentorship program pairing senior staff with entry-level employees from marginalized backgrounds, quickly gained traction. It was informal at first, just coffee chats and shared lunches, but soon stories began to surface. A Latina intern invited to present her research to the board, an older black maintenance worker asked to consult on building redesigns for accessibility. These were small ripples, but they spread. Elaine kept her promises. She met monthly with every department, not to dictate, but to listen. One night, after a particularly long session with the finance team, she found Marcus waiting for her outside the building, holding 2 paper bags. "Thought you might be hungry," he said, handing her one. It was fried chicken from a local Harlem spot Marcus loved, the kind of place Elaine would have never discovered on her own. "It's messy," he warned. She smiled. "So am I these days." They sat on the hood of his car under the fading city lights, eating with their hands, laughing between bites. It wasn't a date, not exactly, but it wasn't nothing either. Afterward, as they drove back, Elaine asked, "Do you think they'll ever fully accept me? Us?" Marcus didn't answer right away. Then he said, "Some won't, some can't. But we didn't start this to be accepted. We started this to be honest. And sometimes, truth is enough." She nodded slowly. "I keep wondering if it's worth it." He looked over. "It is. Because every time you stand up, someone watching learns they can too. But not everything healed so easily." Wesley Kroll, the IT staffer caught falsifying access logs, had disappeared quietly after the investigation. Now, rumors began surfacing that he had joined a rival tech firm and was peddling internal documents. Legal action was being considered. Naomi, ever strategic, warned Elaine to stay out of it directly. "This isn't your battle. Let legal handle it." But Elaine couldn't shake the feeling that the campaign to dismantle her leadership wasn't over. It had just shifted battlegrounds. Then came the Anonymous podcast. A weekly show titled Corporate Truths began airing episodes that mirrored Monroe Tech's timeline with eerie accuracy. It didn't name names, but it didn't have to. The stories were too close, too specific. Marcus listened to the second episode and felt the hairs on his neck rise. The voice was distorted, but the phrasing it sounded like Dorian Finch, and worse, the episode hinted at more recordings, more secrets, implicating not just Elaine, but Marcus too. "They're baiting us," he said, trying to provoke a reaction. Elaine nodded. "And we won't give it to them, not yet." Together, they made a plan, not just to respond, but to preempt. Elaine scheduled an all-hands meeting for the following week. It wouldn't be defensive. It would be a celebration of progress made, of voices heard, of the future being built brick by brick. We tell our story before they try to sell theirs, she told Marcus. But not with statistics or slogans, with people. She began reaching out, to the intern with the braids, to Daniel, to Tasha, to the janitor who now helped lead the accessibility committee. Each one would speak, briefly, honestly, about what had changed for them not just in policy, but in dignity. As the week progressed, anticipation built. Some questioned the move. It's risky, Naomi warned. You open the floor, you can't always control what's said. Elaine replied. That's the point. They've tried to control the narrative. We're letting it breathe. The night before the meeting, Marcus stood alone in the security control room, watching the empty atrium where the event would be held. He saw his own reflection in the dark monitor and whispered, "Let them come, let them watch. This time, we're not hiding." The next morning, the atrium was full, cameras ready, microphones tested. Marcus stood behind the curtain with Elaine. "You nervous?" he asked. She exhaled. "Number just ready." And then the lights dimmed, the music faded, and the future stepped forward to speak. As the lights dimmed and the room fell silent, Elaine stepped out onto the modest stage, her heels echoing softly against the wooden floor. The atrium, usually a space for company announcements and sterile quarterly reviews, now pulsed with a quiet electricity. There were no branded banners, no corporate slogans, just rows of employees, eyes fixed on her, and a long row of microphones waiting to be shared. She didn't stand behind a podium. Instead, she stood beside it, hands relaxed, eyes steady. "This isn't a speech," she began, her voice clear but intimate, "and it's not a victory lap. This is a conversation that should have started long before me. But since I'm here, and you're here, let's have it now." A ripple passed through the room. Some leaned forward, others held their breath. Elaine continued, "We've been through a season of fire. Some of it came from outside, some from within. And while we've made progress, progress isn't the same as peace. So today, we're going to hear from each other, not filtered, not managed, just people, sharing what this journey has meant." "End." She nodded toward the front row. The first to rise was Daniel, the shy IT analyst who had helped uncover the hidden server logs. He walked to the mic slowly, paper in hand, but didn't read from it. "I used to think integrity meant staying quiet and doing your job right. Now I know it means speaking up even when your voice shakes." There was a moment of stillness, then a few claps, hesitant at first, then stronger. After him came Tasha Lynn, poised and precise, but her voice cracked when she spoke. "For years, I was the one they brought in for photo ops, diversity audits, to make the brochures look inclusive. Now I'm the one writing the policy. That shift didn't come from nowhere. It came because someone decided the right thing wasn't just ethical, it was necessary." The applause that followed was loud, unapologetic. The janitor, Harold, now part of the accessibility redesign team, shared how he'd cleaned the same office floors for 30 years and never once been asked his opinion on anything beyond where the mop closet was. Then Marcus pulled me into a meeting and said, "Tell me where the building fails people." And I did, and they listened. Harold's voice was gravelly but warm. "That ain't charity, that's respect." Elaine watched from the side, her heart caught in her throat. She saw the change not in policies or percentages, but in posture and how people stood taller, how they spoke clearer, how they looked each other in the eye instead of down at the floor. When Marcus's turn came, he hesitated for a fraction of a second before stepping forward. He wasn't in a suit. He wore a black button-down, rolled at the sleeves, with a pin on his chest, an enamel image of two clasped hands, one light, one dark. He didn't touch the mic. He just looked around and began. "I grew up in the Bronx. My mom cleaned hotel rooms. My dad worked graveyard shifts at the post office. We didn't expect justice. We hoped for survival. So when I walked into Monroe Tech, I never imagined I'd be standing here." He paused, then continued. "But here's what I've learned. You can't reform a place you're afraid to be visible in. You can't protect people you don't see. And you can't fix a system if you believe it was built to include you from the start." A few nods, a few tears. "I didn't ask for this spotlight," Marcus said, "but now that it's here, I won't waste it." Elaine returned to the mic. "There's more to say, more to do. But if you feel like something in this room today moved you, made you think differently, or reminded you of what dignity looks like, don't keep it to yourself." She glanced at the camera. And for those watching outside this room, because I know you're watching, remember, progress isn't a threat, it's a promise." She stepped back. The applause lasted nearly 2 full minutes, but not everyone was clapping. That night, Naomi called her. "There's movement on the Finch front," she said. "His name's been scrubbed from 3 different consulting firms, but financial trails show he's still working quietly, and someone's funding him." Elaine sighed. "Who?" "That's the problem," Naomi replied. "The money's coming through shell corporations, but one lead suggests a connection to a former board member, one who voted for your removal and then resigned." Elaine didn't need a name. She already knew. Gerald Hanover. The same man who once told her in a closed-door meeting that men like Marcus are better kept in the background. The implications were clear. Dorian hadn't just gone rogue, he was part of a sustained effort to destabilize the company from outside. And they weren't done yet. 3 days later, another podcast episode aired. This one was different. The distorted voice was replaced by audio clips, taken from internal meetings, spliced, edited, manipulated. It painted Elaine as ruthless, manipulative, controlling. Worse, it painted Marcus as her pawn, implying his rise was orchestrated, not earned. The comments section exploded. Racist slurs, sexist digs, calls for resignation. The damage was swift. Marcus found her sitting alone in her office, staring at the muted news stream playing the podcast reactions. "We knew this would come," he said. Elaine didn't answer right away. Then she whispered, "They're trying to rewrite us in real time." He sat beside her. "Then we write louder." Naomi entered moments later, holding a thick envelope. "We traced the recordings. They were leaked by someone inside the legal team." Elaine's eyes narrowed. "Names?" Naomi nodded. 1. Susan Weller. The same associate who had once congratulated Elaine on bringing warmth to the boardroom. The betrayal cut deep. "We need to make an example," Marcus said. "Not for revenge, for clarity." Elaine nodded. "Then we do it by the book. No shortcuts." The next morning, an official legal notice was sent to Susan Weller, placing her on leave pending investigation. The same message went company-wide with full transparency. What happened, what would be done, and what Monroe Tech would no longer tolerate. Outside, the press continued their circus. But inside, a new culture was calcifying, one built not on PR, but on proof. That evening, as Elaine left the building, she saw Marcus waiting beside his car, umbrella in hand. "You always show up in the rain," she joked. "Only when I know you need to be reminded," he said. "Of what?" "That no storm lasts forever." They walked together in silence, the city humming around them, the future waiting like a loaded question. But for the first time, Elaine didn't feel outnumbered. She felt ready. By the time Elaine stood at the window of the 40th floor conference room on the morning of the board's final quarterly meeting, the skyline outside had begun to blur with the steady mist of fall rain. The city pulsed faintly beneath the clouds, as if even the buildings were holding their breath. Behind her, voices murmured the board, legal counsel, PR, investors all shuffling papers, powering up tablets, performing their roles as if today was just another ritual of status and structure. But everyone knew, this meeting wasn't just about numbers, it was about control, legacy, and the inconvenient truth that some people didn't want to hear from voices like Elaine's or Marcus's. She turned from the glass, not with defiance, but with calm purpose, and walked toward the long table. Gerald Hanover was there, just a silent observer now, no longer a voting member, but his presence made the air tighter. Elaine looked him straight in the eye, then began. "Before we get into projections and forecasts, I want to speak plainly," she said. "This company has always been proud of its innovation, but innovation is more than new products. It's the courage to question who has power and why. In the past year, we've faced sabotage, slander, and systemic decay. And yet here we are, not broken, but better, because we chose to evolve. Not just with numbers, but with humanity." She paused, scanning the room. Some board members met her gaze. Others glanced at their watches. Still, she continued, "I won't sugarcoat the truth. There have been costs, but every challenge has clarified our mission, and I will not allow our progress to be buried beneath fear." Someone cleared their throat at the far end of the table, a soft objection rising. Elaine raised her hand gently. "I'm not asking for your applause. I'm reminding you why you're here, not to protect comfort, but to protect vision. If you're unwilling to evolve, you'll be left behind." She sat. The room was heavy with the weight of her words. Outside that room, Marcus paced the mezzanine level, eyeing the security feeds. The day felt too quiet, like the last page of a book someone had tried to rewrite. Naomi walked up beside him, tablet in hand. "It's done," she said. "Susan's NDA has been invalidated. She's confessed to the leak, and the internal memo is drafted. Legal's moving to prosecute." Marcus didn't smile. "Will it matter?" Naomi looked at him carefully. "To the ones watching quietly, hoping for someone to hold the line? Yes, it always matters." Downstairs, something unexpected unfolded. Employees began gathering, not in protest, but in quiet solidarity. No chants, no signs. Just rows of people standing still in the lobby. Engineers, janitors, assistants, interns, veterans of the company who had been invisible until the light shifted. One by one, they took out their ID badges and turned them backward, not in rebellion, but in unity. A silent message. We are more than roles or ranks. We are people, and we're not going back. Elaine received the photo mid-meeting sent from Tasha. She showed it to the board without comment. No speech, no plea, just an image. It spoke louder than any quarterly earnings. Later that afternoon, Marcus and Elaine walked together toward the lobby. She held the elevator doors open and asked softly, "Do you ever wonder if we changed anything?" Marcus raised an eyebrow. "You're standing in the middle of it." When the doors opened, the lobby had cleared. But the ID badges still hung backward. A janitor sweeping near the entrance gave them a nod, not deferential, but equal. Elaine exhaled. "I've been in boardrooms for 2 decades, she murmured. "But this feels like leadership. Ugh." As they exited into the gray drizzle outside, a familiar voice called from across the street. It was Harold, the janitor turned consultant, holding a cup of coffee in each hand. "Figured you two might need a warm-up," he said. Marcus grinned, taking one. Elaine took the other with a nod of gratitude. "You always know when to show up," she said. Harold winked. "That's what family does." The word lingered in the air like steam from the cups. Family, not bound by blood, but by truth, by fire, by the quiet choice to stand together when it mattered most. That night, the final episode of Corporate Truths dropped. But this time, the voice was no longer distorted. It was Dorian Finch raw, unedited, desperate. He framed himself as a whistleblower, claiming Elaine had manipulated company culture to consolidate power. But the public wasn't buying it anymore. The comments had changed. People cited the mentorship programs, the transparency updates, the ID badge protest. The court of public opinion had shifted, and so had the narrative. Justice hadn't screamed, it had whispered. And it had been heard. In her apartment, Elaine sat by the window, listening to the rain. She opened a leather-bound notebook, one her father had given her decades ago, when she first dreamed of leading. Inside, she scribbled a single line. "Power that refuses to be questioned isn't power, it's fear." Then she closed the book and looked out into the storm. Across the city, Marcus tucked his daughter into bed. She asked, "Daddy, are you famous now?" He smiled. "No, baby, just honest." She thought for a moment. That's better, and he knew she was right. At Monroe Tech, the lobby lights dimmed, but the walls remembered, not in plaques or portraits, but in echoes. Footsteps that had once walked invisibly now left a mark. Words that had once been whispered now shaped policy, and names once buried in the footnotes of meeting minutes now stood at the top of change. Because one woman said yes to truth, because one man dared to ask for more, because a company decided it would rather be brave than comfortable, and because some storms don't destroy, they cleanse. The story reminds us that true leadership is not about titles or control, but about courage, integrity, and the willingness to stand for justice even when it's uncomfortable. It shows that change begins with listening to the unheard, lifting up the unseen, and choosing truth over silence. In a world that often rewards power over principle, the greatest legacy we can leave is one rooted in dignity, empathy, and the quiet strength of doing what's right.